Okay, we're live. Good morning. It's Rita at Travel Nurse Channel. I have a guest. Her name is Penny Zenker, and you haven't seen me in a while. There she is. She's on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast, and we talk about all things healthcare and particularly travelers, nurses, therapists, technicians, and so forth. But today I thought we'd come at it from a different perspective. Penny, I discovered and met a short while ago, is a best-selling author. She wrote The Productivity Zone, Stop the Tug of War with Time. And that really spoke to me as a nurse and personally. And I'm a time eater. I just use up time. Actually, being a grandma has helped me because everything stops and I focus on that baby when she's around. But anyway, I'm going to introduce Penny. She is a keynote speaker. She is a FOCUSologist. I think she can explain that to us, but I think that says a lot. But she motivates people in regards to communication. She's a neuroscientist, a master. That's where her master's is at. And travelers are in a unique position because they're assumed to be on staff, but they're really self-managers. They have a company, but their company is in another place. And so their needs are a little unique. And we've talked about that from interview points to financial issues and so forth. So I'm hoping, Penny, you need to kind of introduce yourself because I've sort of jumped around. But welcome this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great, great. So we're talking mostly to travel nurses. We're talking to a lot of healthcare people and time management in the healthcare field, particularly in the acute setting, but also in the long-term setting, and also in the post-COVID, or we're still in a COVID situation where there's not enough staff. So you're dealing with multiple things that are not working with you necessarily.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So where do we start? I mean, first of all, I do want to clarify that I'm not a neuroscientist.
Okay.
I only want to clarify that because if some of these people have questions about the brain and all of that, I'm a master. I have a mastery in neurolinguistic programming, which is more of a part of behavioral psychology.
I actually knew that. I forgot that.
I just want to make sure because we get questions about what's happening in the hypothalamus and whatever. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
But so where do we start?
Yeah, well, if you were talking to a group that had a time management issue, the two key things that jump at me is communication is a little different because you have to be respectful, but you also have to advocate for yourself when you go into a new environment. If the environment is not hospitable, the best thing about a team is that people work together. So to be isolated, sometimes the travelers do feel that way. They feel like they're just thrown out there.
Sure.
Not given an orientation, not given direction. So communication is key. And then I think time management is always going to be a helpful subject for most people, particularly in the healthcare.
Okay. Well, let's start with communication. You started that first.
Okay.
And so I think that it is a challenging position. I've been a contractor before, so I understand, right? I've been working for one company and they have this umbrella over me, but then I'm put in the client's site and I'm sort of there and I have two people managing me, one from the head office and one from the location. And it can feel isolating and that you don't fit in and you don't know all the information. You're coming and you've got to catch up really, really quickly. And I did this also when I was in Zurich, Switzerland. So I was also having another language and on top of it. So I can relate to some degree. And what I found was, the first thing that I find with communication or anything, any experience that we have is going to be influenced by what comes before that. So in my TEDx, which I encourage everybody to take a look at, might reinforce some of the things that we're talking about. Plus, I'm almost at 1 million views. So I love your support in that.
Okay.
But one of the things I talk about
is how I found you.
Yes. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So one of the things I talk about is the energy of our thought, right? So the question is, as we go into this scenario, are we feeling like and saying to ourselves, this is going to suck, or like, I've not this again, like, this is so hard. So it really, whatever happens before is the pre-frame or the primer to our experience. So we have to remember that, because if we're not intentional and purposeful about the energy that we bring when we start something, we may have already tainted it, right?
Yeah.
We may not start it in the best possible way that we could. We might be closed-minded, or assuming certain challenges that are going to be there. And the likelihood, if we assume that, is that that's what we'll experience. So, and that's what I found as well. And I was coming in, and I remember being in a board meeting, and it was all in German, and I had no idea what my assignments were supposed to be. And that created a lot of anxiety. So if we start a situation with this anxiety, then it's only going to unravel from there.
You can't imagine succeeding.
Right.
On the other side of that, so we're talking to some nurses and therapists that have experienced traveling. They've done it more than once. And then we're talking to people that are newbies or just considering it. The other side of that coin could be, they could be overly romantic and think it's just going to be, oh, I'm going to work in California. It's like Disneyland. It's going to be great. I'm going to go to Yosemite and I'm going to meet Mickey. And I this one couple that I found, they were super romantic about it. And they got there in the place that their company had assigned them to. They didn't have sheets. They didn't have, they didn't have a lot of things. So they thought, oh, well, the hell with this. We're working tomorrow. Let's go have dinner. They order their dinner, and the next thing you know, they both burst into tears, get on the phone and call their moms and stuff, So, and it turned out okay. It was their first travel assignment. And, but I feel like that could be sabotaging you as well, to be like a little overly romantic.
Absolutely. Right. So it's just realizing that whatever state you go into it. So you want to be a realist, right? You want to not see things worse than they are and not see things better than they are, and just go in with an open mind, saying you don't know how they are, and that you'll listen and that you'll experience it. And based on that, you'll decide how to best maneuver yourself in the situation. Right. It's, if you play it as a game, I find sometimes we have these little psychological hacks. So if I enter the situation like I'm entering a video game, right? I don't know what to expect. Yeah, I've done some of these before, so I've been through some of the doors and can imagine what might be behind it, but I'm still at alert because it's kind of a new game, or it's a new level of the game. And so it helps us to be more playful with it, and to say, oh, that's not what I expected. And what happens in a video game when we don't succeed when we first open that door, we just start over, right? If we have that mindset going in, it's just going to make things a lot easier.
I like that analogy.
Flexibility.
That's a really good analogy. And the other thing is, even though you were all the way in Zurich and everybody was speaking German, you weren't really alone. You had a team that wanted you in Zurich, and then you had the people that sent you there. So you had resources, but just at that moment, it's a lonely feeling. Like, uh-oh.
Yeah. It's our reality is what we feel, right? So I did feel alone. And it was also exhausting. So one of the things we also need to do is, in those times of extra stress or, uncertainty, get a little bit more sleep, just take care of yourself a little bit better, a little meditation to help to, and people who don't meditate, just some deep breathing, some exercise, right, will get you breathing a little bit more deeply. And that will help us, because when our body feels good and rested, then we're going to have more clarity. We're going to be able to access that part of our brain that we need to, as opposed to going into fight, flight, or freeze mode, which just shuts down everything.
Yeah. Awesome. So, you talk to a lot of people in business as well, and there is a business side to this. Nurses show up and they have to be technically savvy, and they have to have skills, and but they also have to realize that it is a job and somebody's paying them for it.
Mhm.
So, so time management. This nurse could be working in an ICU. She could be working in an emergency room. She could be working in labor and delivery. All these areas, when things are critical, they're very critical, and things roll along and they're okay. So I don't know, in general, are there some general tips? Because you said things already that they've heard already. So I know we're on the right track. But yeah, time management is a big issue for nurses.
Well, I think what would be helpful for me, because there are some general things, but I talk a lot to businesses. And so what I share with businesses may be different in a critical care type of scenario, right? But I can share a couple of things. Tell me if I'm on the right direction, or if you have a specific question, you know, that would also be helpful in that context. But you know, what I talk a lot about is people are challenged with setting priorities. So, you know, it's because we care, so we want to make everyone happy, you know, especially I guess if there's a lot of things blowing up at once, you know, then it seems like everything's competing with, all of these are competing priorities. But what I say is that that there's actually no competing priorities. It means you don't have priorities.
Interesting.
So because they wouldn't be competing if you were clear how you were going to address and what was most important. So, you know, and I think emergency room is a perfect example. There are rules that define what's most important, what goes first, and then what comes after. And to my understanding, I'm not working in that environment, but in order to stay sane and cope in that environment, is those rules are what support you, and you don't get emotionally attached to any particular situation. You're disassociated from it so that you can follow the rules. And that's what saves lives, right? Is that you follow the rules and that you say, this one is more critical and it's identified as this goes first. And then you can be, when you're disassociated from the other things that are going on, and you can, like you said, with your baby, you pull yourself into the present moment and you say, I'm present 100% to deal with this situation as quickly and as effectively as I can. And then you'll go to the next one when this one is complete. And so that's the way to avoid those competing priorities, is to have clear rules. So if your environment doesn't set those rules, then you have to set those rules. And that's one of the things I talk about for businesses too, but it's even more so, you know, in a critical care is you can't have your emotions and your feelings and other things keeping you from being present with what needs you most, because that's also going to take you twice as long if you're not just handling one thing and then the other thing and then the other. There's, I would imagine, very little multitasking that can even possibly go on in that type of situation.
The ER stories are just, there's many stories, but you're right. Those rules, the people that are bleeding, the people that are having an active heart attack or a stroke, they get to the head of the line. And it's not that we're asking these nurses to not feel, it's we're asking them to put that in a place, because maybe after work, or maybe when you get home, or maybe, you know, when you set time aside, you can review all that. But yeah,
it's compartmentalization. The better you get at it in critical situations, then the better you're going to be able to serve who you're serving at that moment, and continue to move on to the next and to the next.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. I usually say this at the beginning and I forgot, but I have a comment line. I don't see anybody. But if I'll say it to the audience, whoever is at large, sometimes people are checking in when we're live, but I was absent last week, so they may think I'm absent, but here we are. But they can, this is archived. So we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and people can check in anytime they want. But if you're watching right now and you have any questions, either for myself, Rita, or for Penny, we're here talking about all things that relate to doing a good job in the travel world. And Penny is or kind of specialist. She speaks to a lot of businesses. She has a varied background, and she offers things that I really think will benefit our viewers. So if you're out there and you want to comment, I welcome you to. We have a little bit of time, right, Penny? You don't have a time limit here?
No, not necessarily. I have us down for an hour, so.
Yeah. So that's usually what I do. If I don't hear from a lot of people and we feel like we've concluded, we can sign off. But everybody, just another reminder, we're going to be here pretty much well, I'm here every Tuesday. Penny's welcome back anytime. But we want to talk to nurses that are considering traveling, to recruiters that recruit those nurses, to doctors and specialists that have their own practice that need to recruit for their practices. So it's a huge world of travelers. And it's not just the healthcare realm, because Penny just shared that her company sent her abroad to help a company. So I think it's an interesting lifestyle. And if you're considering it, there's a lot of pros and cons. So we do that in some of our broadcasts. We talk about the pros and cons. And you said something early on that I think speaks to a lot of nurses, is know what you want, right? Think about what are your expectations, and so that mindset. So if you've traveled, and I've said this so many times, everybody can have a bad Tuesday, right? That doesn't mean Wednesday's going to be bad or next Tuesday's going to be bad. So you want to reset. Take those breaths, do that meditation and so forth, and allow. Now, that other thing about rules and so forth. So a lot of nurses or a lot of travelers that go into it are expected to have, particularly in the specialty areas, anywhere from 2 to 5 years of experience. So you're not necessarily a fresh grad. You're not necessarily new to what you're doing. You have expertise and so forth. And that is a great thing. However, you have the experience you have where you had it. And you get into a new situation, and maybe you worked at a trauma one, like a big facility, a university, a teaching, and you're going to a small rural area. It's a little different. So
and things work until they don't. Sometimes strategies in one environment work, and sometimes they don't work in another environment for various different reasons. Like you said, it might be size, it might be the context of the team, the number of people that are on the team. So it's having that flexibility to adapt in each situation that's that much more important for somebody who's traveling. And if I may, I'd like to come back to that point. You mentioned the words reset.
Yes.
So it's not just resetting every day, right? We do need to reset every day for sure. And we get a good night's sleep, and that helps us to reset in the practices when we get up in the morning. But we can reset throughout the day. And I think that's really important too, is that we don't have to have a whole bad day.
Right.
So we have to remember that it's not this all or nothing thinking, oh, this day is gone,
Yeah.
Oh, I had 2 potato chips, I might as well just eat the whole bag. No. Right? So we have to step out of that all or nothing thinking and remember that we have opportunities to reset, even if it's just for a quick moment, right? You may only have a quick moment between patients that you're seeing or between interactions with other staff members, but stop and take a deep breath and just reset yourself. There's different ways to do that. And, Viktor Frankl, in his book, The Man's Search for Meaning, he talked about how important in the Holocaust, right? These people were living in an atrocious, horrendous situation. And they said, he talked about the space, the pause between stimulus and response, right? So that as we're experiencing something, there is a space. And the more aware we are of that, the more that space kind of expands. Even though time doesn't change our awareness, we know that sometimes, I just did this morning, I had to hold a pose in my training for 30 seconds, this stretch position. And I was like, that was the longest 30 seconds ever. Right. So it's like, but sometimes 30 seconds goes like that. And sometimes it slows down. So when we're aware in that moment, hyper aware, that window opens up for us, for it to be longer, for us to take that space and be more purposeful and intentional about what we're going to do next, how we're going to show up, and how we can reset.
Awesome. Awesome. I actually don't remember the title. ER was in it, but it was a book written by an ER doctor and his experience. And when he was doing his fellowship, he was already up to 2 children and a wife and so forth. So he moonlighted. So his training was at this big university hospital with all of the different neurologists and so forth. And then he'd go work moonlighting in a small ER. And the experience was so different for him. Yeah. And so he shared sort of between the lines the moments that he experienced. And he remembered what this doctor did. And anyway, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to read his perspective and how he managed these 2 completely different settings simultaneously. You know,
right?
It was quite remarkable. That's awesome. I really like that. That pause.
Yeah,
it doesn't take
the power of the pause. It doesn't, and that's a reset, right? Is to just extend that pause a little bit more. Like our instinct is to jump to the next thing.
Yeah.
If you took 30 seconds, it's not going to change anything, but it may make all the difference in how you show up to the next thing.
Yes. And before I started doing this broadcast, one of my jobs was to be a manager of nurses that were on travel assignments. And it was sort of, I felt like it was my job to talk them off the ledge, you know? And so they're in the middle of it. These are well-trained people. It's not what they expected and so forth. And the last thing you ever want to do is walk away from the job. So I would often say that, where are you? Can you get to a bathroom? Can you get outside? Can you take 3 minutes, you know? And that's excellent. 30 seconds even. 5 seconds.
Mel Robbins talks about the 5-second rule. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah, I am familiar with that.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
A launch into, that can be a cue into a different way of thinking, a different way of showing up, of giving yourself that. It can be the let go period. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Letting go of this and stepping into this.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. And it is. The communication is back to communication, how people communicate with you. I had one nurse telling me, I'm looking right at my manager. And I asked her, and I thought, is she busy in thought? So I asked her a second time. And after the second time, the manager walked away. She was no help at all. And that makes you feel, am I invisible? Am I not going to get the help I need? So you do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'll go over here and I'll talk to this person.
Right.
Or I'll make an executive decision, you know?
Right. It helps you to pivot, right? It can be your pivot moment or whatever it is. And, back to communication, that person that you're speaking to that you may have asked twice, you don't know what's going on for them. They might be so completely overwhelmed that they didn't hear a thing that you said.
Right.
And it's not, and it has
like
nothing
in the movies,
to do with you. Right.
Yeah.
It may have nothing to do with you. They're just not there. And
right.
Just,
the
not
mouth
there.
is moving, but nothing's. Yeah.
Right. Hello. And so, we have to create that flexibility for ourselves. So if we're not getting what we need, then we can go somewhere else to get it. We also need to have that empathy and understanding and meet people where they're at.
Yes.
In that communication, that pause can be to think about, well, okay, what's my next step? Do I ask it in a different way? Because sometimes people don't understand the way that we're asking. They don't understand the question. And then we ask it the same exact way and they still don't understand.
You have to restate.
So maybe we have to change the way that we ask the question so that it's better understood. So we need to see, is this an understanding question? Is this an overwhelmed question? Where are we really? And all of this happens like in that split second.
Right. Yeah. I think you have to look at yourself too, because if that nurse is brand new. She's on the job. A couple of things are happening. Somebody's bleeding here. Somebody's got a heart attack.
Right.
And she goes in and I go, there's too much, and it could cause that other person to shut down.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Yeah, this is so applicable. I knew when I saw you and what you had to say that it would definitely be applicable to our people out there. And I forgot to say, doctors travel too. They do something different. It's usually called locum tenens. So those assignments are not necessarily 13 weeks or 90 days. Those can be a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another group that we're speaking to nurses, to doctors, to x-ray techs, to physical therapists. All kinds of people are jumping in and helping when they're needed. Another thing I think we could talk about too is knowledge. During COVID, you may have seen on the news, or you may have seen it all over the internet and so forth, things particularly in the beginning, but even now, because we're getting the new strains and so forth, a lot of information, a lot of misinformation. My friend was, she has since retired, and I'm really happy for her, but she was a respiratory therapist in a medium-sized hospital during COVID, and they didn't have enough equipment. They were getting new information every day. She was frustrated, and the patients were doing terribly. So
Wow.
that is the side effects of this COVID were terrible. I don't even want to get graphic, but they were not doing well. They were going down fast and disintegrating in front of our eyes. It was terrible. And
at a rate that they're not used to, right? So
no,
I mean, there's some loss that they're
ICU.
used to, but it's just exasperated, right?
Right.
And so it is a question. It is a question of how to pivot and deal with that amount of loss, and right. And so it might mean, you mentioned earlier the 3 minutes. You might have to pull yourself together and take the 3 minutes, right? If you feel like there's no space for you to do that, but otherwise you're going to be out for how long?
Right.
So do what you need to do to pull yourself together and cope so that you can serve.
And they were working a lot of overtime and so forth. And then she finally got her vacation, but she couldn't go anywhere, So it was a dreadful time. And when I would speak to her, she would sound really almost manic, and she didn't recognize it. And I felt like, if that's her, somebody who, she worked with neonatal, she worked in the ER, she worked in the ICU. This is an experienced practitioner. And
I think to your point, it doesn't matter how much experience one has.
Yeah.
Because even the best of us, the most experienced, have challenges.
Right.
And so, because also the way that our, this is what neurolinguistics tells me, is that we take in so much information and so much is going on, but we filter that, right? And we delete, distort, and generalize things as we process it. And the challenge is, right, if it's too much, right, it can just but it's like, how are we processing this? And we need to give us space in these really difficult times. If we're going into fight or flight, that we give ourselves some space to figure out ways to cope and pull ourselves, back together, and to see, okay, sometimes it's you need someone to talk to and to get it out. Sometimes, it's crazy things, but I've been to scream therapy where you need, because it's actually, or laughter, yoga, right? Sometimes it's trapped in your body, and our bodies are meant to release. Right?
Yeah.
They're designed to release. However, I believe that true resilience is being able to practice releasing. Nice. And there are different ways to do that. Humor is one of those. Screaming is one of them, right? It may seem you don't want to do that in the middle of the ER room, but I've been, to places to help to get rid of trauma and other things, is that people are screaming. What it's doing is it's affecting the nervous system. It's letting it out of the nervous system.
How cool. She would say to me, I just need to have some fun. I just need to have some fun. I need to go down to the ocean, or we need to go have a beer. She just kept saying, somebody checked in here and I'm not sure, maybe lost in translation. It looks like VARK Tech. Does that make any sense to you? No. Well, her name is Emma. Hello, Emma. Thanks for checking in. And we're talking about ways to manage our time, to improve our communications. And we're talking to people that travel for a living. Penny is an expert. Hey, Penny, can you explain FOCUSologist, how that came to be?
Sure. Well, I think it's one of those things where we all have recurring challenges that bring us to the next level of that challenge, right? It doesn't mean I'm stupid. It just means that, we all have it, and we all interpret it as that same challenge too, right? So to me, a FOCUSologist, the definition I've given it is being able to control and direct the energy of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions to produce a positive, meaningful outcome. So, it's really because we get so caught up in things that we can't control, and that exhausts us, and it takes it takes us away from being able to control and direct what we can control, right? And that would be how we think, like I said, how we enter into a situation, how we show up, what are our beliefs, what meaning are we giving any particular situations, how are we feeling, and then affecting those actions that we're taking. And so, I think it started. My father passed away in an accident at a youngish age. So I was 19, 20 years old, and it was my first real lesson on understanding on what's important and how to really prioritize and decide what you want for your life, and to be able to push out things that are not important, people who don't add value to my life. Mm-hmm. Why am I wasting my time with them? Right. So it was my first sort of introduction to that. And I believe, as and that's what led me to go abroad. Is I went abroad first to go to school for a semester. And then I was excited later in my career to go to Zurich, Switzerland. I lived there for 16 years. And I feel like I was just constantly getting these messages of, and we all do, we might interpret it differently, but to step back and to reevaluate what's important.
What is important.
And to be clear on what we're focusing on, that we're focusing on the right things, the things that move the needle, the things that matter to us. Stephen Covey talked about values and living our values as part of time management strategies. I think it goes much deeper than that, because we all violate our values on a regular basis. But it's having that in its awareness. I say that it's really about managing our energy. Even more, values play a role in that, but I bring it back to that energy of our thoughts. So I kind of incorporate that theme into everything that I do, whether it's how we're communicating with one another, whether it's, how we're deciding what to schedule and what to do first and setting our priorities, or any other thing.
Yeah.
So
that was awesome. You said so much, and I'm like, oh, the energy of our thought. You said so much. I just need to kind of sit with it,
process it.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, like somebody on the job, even somebody, you go out, everything's fine. You have your list of things to do, and then you're stuck somewhere because the battery in your car died. There's no timing on that. Thinking, oh, what do they last? 3 years? Should I have checked this 6 months ago? That's history. Now I have to deal now with right now. The next appointment, how soon the AAA guy is going to get out here, and so forth. So it's
right. And it's how much stress do you give yourself? Let's say there's a scenario like that, right? Like I was caught at the bank today for an hour and wasn't.
That you didn't expect it to be an hour. Yeah.
So, but it happened.
Right.
So the question is, do you sit there and be pissed off at the bank clerk or whoever's helping you? Do you, like some people, you just can see them, right? The steam's coming out their nose and out their ears, and they're, and they're going to give themselves a heart attack, or you just relax into it and go, okay,
Yeah.
this is a new scenario, and I'm going to
This is a good time for that laughter. This is a good time for that laughter.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good time for the laughter. It's a good time just to step back and say, okay, what do I do from here? How do I handle the situation? Do I have something I need to cancel? If I have my phone with me, I can cancel it. And you just do the best you can in the circumstances that you're in. So one of the things that brings us the most trouble in our time management, in our relationships, in our money making and everything is where we get caught up in resisting our reality.
Resisting reality. That's a mouthful.
It's the truth, right? So the more that we create this heightened awareness of what our reality is, that comes back to what we talked about in the beginning of, how are you going into a situation? Are you accepting your reality? Then you can put on that problem solving hat and say, this is my reality. What's my best next step? Where do I go from here?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I think I'm going to let you go a little early, Penny, because people aren't checking in, and I want to kind of sit with some of the stimulating things, the places you took us. They warrant some pondering and so forth. So
we went a little shark deep there, so you gotta do some.
It's wonderful, and it speaks to me when I think of all my time as a nurse, and I know the nurses are doing, my friends now, their children are nurses, so it is a different world. I see it from a different perspective. I was clinical for a huge long time of my career and loved it, and then took that turn into the administrative and so forth. And so I'm always interested in what the clinical people are doing now, and it really isn't that different. I mean, the machines are different, the medicines are different, but for example, when I started way back in the 70s, and it was different then because we had 20 some odd patients, and we took care of diagnoses. So it was the gallbladder in room 10, and it was the cardiac patient in room 20, and we kept our patients for like weeks on end. It was a very different world. And I worked with a team. So I was the RN, the LVN, and the CNA, and that's how we managed. But if one of those patients got into trouble, that's when your time management came in. I'm going to call the doctor. I need you to go check these patients, blah, blah, blah. So now it's different. We have more acute patients for a shorter amount of time. But the nurses and the doctors, we've got more technology, but it doesn't seem like that saved us. Like this ER doctor talking about his experience, he said it took him such a long time to get the paperwork done, to get the COVID. They added more things because now we have something we're not dealing with. So we have to do studies and trends and so forth. So it just seems like you gain some, you lose some. You gain some this time management thing. So it is different than the way I managed things in the 70s, now in 2021, almost 22, but it is still that challenge. And
it definitely is. And, what I want to say here before we get off is, because some of those things, right, to speak to them, they still have to be done. Right. So the question is to what degree, some things need a higher degree of quality than others if it's not possible to get it done in that time.
Right.
And then there's always how you set things up. So time management isn't, there's so many different aspects to it, right? There's how long something takes, and how you approach it. There's also how you set up your environment to make things easy and accessible, right? So if you're having to take extra steps, for instance, and go all the way out and all the way back in and all the way out and all the way back in, maybe something can be set up differently in your environment so that you save some steps and save some of that distance in moving, for instance, or like we talked about the rules, what other types of rules or organization can be set up to make decisions easier and quicker, and, or available to make documentation easier and things like that, right? It's,
Yes, yes,
some of it's in the preparation and taking a step back and saying, stop, this doesn't work very well. So
yes,
we're going to put a team on it to fix it now at some of the root cause of the issues versus keep putting Band-Aids on it.
yes. Yeah, one of the things they have done over the years is brought the computer to the bedside. And I wish that they had voice operated. I also think, being a patient recently, it was only overnight, but they would talk to me from another place, right? And I said, how come you don't have scam cams in here? Because then while you're talking to me and saying, I'm writhing in pain, or I need to go to the bathroom, you could see that, I'm rolled over reading a magazine or something.
Right.
And they said, oh, that's a privacy issue, but there's no quick answer for that. And I'm thinking, those nurses that were at my bedside, and they were wonderful. It was really, you never want to be on the wrong side of the bedpan, is how we nurses talk about it. But the care I got, with the exception of one little area, was really amazing. From the time I walked into the hospital, and you walk in solo now, if you're scheduled for surgery or whatever, it's still COVID times, was exceptional. People were professional, people were kind, people were efficient, all of that was great. But then I thought, they really are, and you could see it on some of the nurses, the older nurses or the nurse manager, you could see that they were in a comfortable place with their skills and so forth. But so, for example, they come in and they see what I need. They talk to me about my medicines and so forth, but then they have to leave, or they have to spend some time at the computer at the bedside doing that charting. And I thought, too bad not, while they're talking to me, if they said to me, I'm here to assess you because I'm coming on duty. Do you mind if I do some charting while I talk to you? And if that were voice activated, that would be such a time saver. The scam cam, it's a privacy issue, but if they asked me, do you mind if we leave the camera on because we're going to be doing this and that, and if you fall asleep or if you don't, we want to continue to watch you and make sure you're safe. Or
Sure,
they keep
you could
one
sign off
person
on that, right?
Yeah, I'm like, you could do whatever you want.
So it's just certain areas are slower to make changes, and
Yes.
as I understand,
Yes.
the larger the institution, and hospitals are big institutions, as they are slow to make changes. And let's just hope that maybe some good things will come out of this COVID era, in the context of pushing things through faster and seeing what's not working.
Right.
And like all these things that you're saying, hopefully you're not the only one that has these thoughts, and that from a top level of running these hospitals, that these types of things are in process.
Yes, yes, yes. Taking care of your staff. We've talked about that many times here, and that is super key. Like if they had just set up a massage, she goes, I'm tired of all the pizza and the lunches, my friend. She would be just so hysterical. It was just overwhelming.
A better way to use their budget, right, than pizza.
Yeah, just create a blackout room. Let them just go and decompress, whatever. Anyway, Penny, you are did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, you have great ideas, for instance, right? And maybe the different levels in the management of the hospital aren't open to hear it, but I think it is valuable for people to share those ideas.
Absolutely.
And sometimes people feel like, well, nobody's going to listen to me. Well, what if they did?
Yes.
What if you were the one that brought the idea because nobody else brought it? So I would say, be that voice, be bold enough to share those ideas.
Oh, you know what? That's the second. Sometimes you get a message and you get a second message. You're right. I will. I'm a great letter writer, but somebody just sent me a Christmas card, and it's totally off. It's a different subject, but they had a memorial at the high school where her son went before he passed, and there was a tree and there was a plaque. And then, this is many years later, and all of a sudden the plaque was gone. And then all of a sudden something else happened. And she said, and after all my questions and inquiries and the people I talked to, nothing happened until 2021. A new plaque showed up on the tree. And the whole thing renewed. It made her year. It made her year that all those conversations. It took years.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to let go, she had to get on with her life and the rest of
Right.
her family and so forth. But somebody heard her at some point. So I think that's another lesson too. If I open my mouth and say, get a scam cam or, whatever. And I did talk to the doctor about that one hiccup, that one, there was this nurse that wasn't yelling at me, but she wasn't speaking in a soft voice. And it was very disturbing. It was shocking. It was a shocking situation. And I told the fellow about it. And he said, oh, well, you need to talk to the surgeon about it because he really can make things move.
Right.
And his first instinct, he's like, really? Are you clear about this? And I go, I am perfectly clear. I can tell you word for word what happened during that short exchange. And then he leaned over and with his mask and everything and gave me a side hug. And that was nice. He brought some compassion to it. And I did tell him that I would note it, because if people don't know something's happening that is affecting patients, how can they fix it?
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's right. And it's so, it happens that people get, are on their last, last leg, or they're just completely frustrated themselves and didn't come across the way even they wanted to.
Yeah.
And without saying something, it's essential that those conversations happen. They're difficult, but it's essential that they happen. And what I was going to say about the, you or someone else sharing those ideas, or sharing that somebody didn't provide the care that's expected, by sharing it, it's going to let you let go of it, so that it doesn't become something that frustrates you, because that can become destructive when we have something, well, they should do this and they should do that and they should do that, right? If we get caught up in that, it becomes a complaining and a destructive type of place. Do you know what I mean? Versus constructive is sharing it in a, in a way of, hey, here's some ideas. And if they fall on deaf ears, or you say it 10 times, it's like a kid who constantly doesn't pick up after themselves. How many times you have to ask them? 10, 12. I'm trying to explain that to my fiance. I'm like, they're kids. You have to tell them sometimes 10 times, but that doesn't mean if you stop telling them and they don't do it, then you haven't taken it to the end. So you have to keep telling them until you see them do it, and not get angry about it.
Right.
So it's kind of a similar thing. If you've got some good ideas, keep sharing them in a positive, hopeful way.
Right. I don't think that nurse should be fired. I don't think, who knows what the circumstances were before, after, and whatever, but it wasn't good at that moment. And a lot of places where I worked when I was clinical, particularly after a emergent event, somebody had to be resuscitated, we would gather right then and there when everything was fresh and say, go to the whole team, 5 people, 10 people, whatever.
Right.
What did we do right? What did we do wrong? How can we improve?
Perfect.
So it's not like we're the worst people in the world. No, we're all caring people. We're part of a strong team, but how do we be a stronger team?
Exactly. It's just
and I thought his initial reaction was great. First, are you clear? And second, oh, I really see you're upset, and I'm going to lean in and hug you.
Right. Yeah.
That was really a good experience, actually. Thank you so much, Penny.
My pleasure. It was great being here.
Thank you so much. And I hope you'll come back sometime. We're going to sign off, but we're here live every Tuesday, or I am. Penny's our guest speaker today. She has a book. Do you have more than one book?
Not yet. I'm working next year. I'll be working on my next book.
Ooh, exciting. But she is the best-selling author of The Productivity Zone, Stop the Tug of War with Time. And just the title alone spoke to me, but so many things that she has to offer are going to be helpful to us in our practice and our daily lives and so forth. So you might want to check out that book. She also has a TED Talk. Is there like a title when they go to the TED Talk to find you? Just put in your name?
They can put in my name, and The Energy of Thought is the name of the
Energy of Thought. That's such a mouthful. It means so much. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to sign off. I usually start with a commercial, but I'll go ahead and end with a commercial. And I'll talk to you soon, Penny. Thank you so very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's really cute. I found this commercial a while ago. Somebody did it for us. Is that her? No. Go away. I'm such a techno dinosaur here. Where's my girl? Bye. Bye, honey. Thank you.
Travel nursing can bring you to places you've never been before. Tell us your story.